Gender-based violence is a global pandemic that affects 1 in 3 women in their lifetime. 35% of women worldwide have experienced either physical and/or sexually intimate partner violence or non-partner sexual violence. Globally, 7% of women have been sexually assaulted by someone other than a partner, and as many as 38% of murders of women are committed by an intimate partner. This issue is not only devastating for survivors of violence and their families, but also entails significant social and economic cost. Failure to address this issue also entails a significant cost for the future, and studies have shown that children growing up with violence are more likely to become survivors themselves or perpetrators of violence in the future. Well, Osayi Alile, CEO of Aspire Coronation Trust Foundation, and Dr. Kemi Dasilva-Ibru, Executive Director at Women at Risk International Foundation, WARIF, join us now to discuss gender-based violence, interventions, challenges, and funding in Nigeria. Good to have you both in the studio. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, first of all, let me start with you, Ms. Alile. Can you just tell us how well would you say Nigeria is doing in curbing gender-based violence?
Thank you. Okay, let me say positive.
Right.
I think we're beginning to know that it exists and to speak about it. So we're getting somewhere. We all know. I mean, if you actually sit down with your families, you know that these things have happened over the years, but we tend not to talk about it. So now people are beginning to bring it to the table and asking, what do we do and how do we do things better? But we have a long way to go. The percentages, I mean, I'm sure Dr. B will talk about that. I mean, the numbers are staggering. The challenges are, you know, it's almost sometimes, it's very overwhelming for us to even have the conversation sometimes. And the funding is just not there because most of these things have to be done in a certain way. So I feel that it's something that we need to talk more about, to know it exists, and find ways, how do we manage the situation, how do we do things better, and we must all do it together. So that's where I think we are at the moment.
And it must understandably be quite triggering as well, the entire subject matter. But what role has the social sector played in combating gender-based violence over the years? And this is for you, Dr. Ibru.
Thank you. Well, I will start by saying, how bad is the problem before we jump into the role of the social sector? Like Osayi was stating earlier, we're living in a country of 200 million people, and half of us are women. And we're dealing with an issue that affects 1 in 4 girls before the age of 18. And we all know we're a very young country. 64% of us are under the age of 24. So when you look at that scope and the sheer magnitude of that problem, and the question is, one sector on its own, in itself, cannot successfully tackle this problem. And so the role of the social sector, which would involve not just the civil society organizations and NGOs like WARIF, but also grant-giving organizations like ACT Foundation, has to be part of an all-inclusive, collaborative effort. It has to be beyond just the public sector and the governmental agencies. It has to be, in addition to that, us coming together collectively to design this blueprint. So we have, to a degree, seen a change, and our role, I think, has been significant in addressing that change. But certainly there's so much more that can and should be done.
Well, I mean, this is a topic that, you know, like you said, it could be very emotional, you know, it could be very difficult to discuss, but then we just have to try our best, you know. So now I'm going to ask, what are the most common victims, you know, of gender-based violence at the moment, Ms. Alile?
Based on what we've done and the researches, I mean, we still find women and girls, but I must tell you, the male folk too, I mean, the numbers are very high. But, you know, for them, people tend not to want to talk about it. The stigma, I mean, we have stigma as women, but for guys, you know how it is. Nobody wants to even mention that those things do exist. So I tend to tell people, I don't like to say women, men, let's just say everyone that has been I mean, it's under the scope of this thing. So we do have both of them, but of course we have women and girls that the numbers are much higher because they're reporting much more than, and they don't. So we've done a lot of work with WRIF over the years, and it's something that we've always talked about and say, okay, how do we bring in the male folks in and the guys and the boys? And they've done a lot of work even with boys because, you know, they have to also go back to the homes. So we have to make sure that the information we're sending out is very, very balanced. We can't do this with just the women. We also have to give information to the men as well, because you can't save one and leave the other, because she's going to go back into that abusive home. You can't save the man and leave the woman. You have to, you know, so the two have to come together. So I would say the common ones we will hear are girls and women, but we also have to make sure that the two genders are also at very high risk.
And if I may add,
yes,
with regards to the numbers, as Osayi rightly said, women and girls typically are the more vulnerable group. But in that group itself, that adolescent schoolgirl is actually the most vulnerable survivor. And this is a statistic that's seen across the world. And the reason for this is because of the environment that enables her to have these acts perpetrated on her, but then ostracizes her so she can't speak out on it. And then when we look at the abuser, the perpetrator, these are typically groomers, and that's the term we use. These are, you know, typically men, sometimes women, adept at identifying that vulnerable schoolgirl, because she's usually one that has probably low social self-esteem. She may have previous trauma in an abusive home, and so therefore she's already naturally a loner, and then it's easy to prey on because she's seeking that validation and that attention.
Groomers and predators, you have to watch out for all of them, even as an adult, to be honest. But of all the number of cases that exist, what's the return like in terms of, are they getting the desired response from the authorities, from law enforcement, from the families, maybe from the churches or corporate bodies? What's the response been, Dr. Ibru?
No, I think with regards to the response, we are moving the needle, albeit slowly, in terms of the available essential services that are available in this part of the world. I think there are certainly challenges with regards to the cases that we see. I mean, these challenges can fall under the availability of these resources that we speak of in terms of the essential services. I mean, we have, across Nigeria, 40 sexual assault referral centers in 20 states. But we're 36 states with 100 million women. We have 11 designated sexual assault courts, which is brilliant, in 4 states. But how about the other 31? And so when you look at it through the lens of the essential services, or you look at it through the lens of justice, then you begin to already see the challenges that are already apparent. And then we have issues when we look at geographical location. Nigeria, 54% of us live in rural areas with no access to urban centers and the care that they can receive. What happens to those women? I mean, this is the work that we work predominantly with ACT Foundation, working in rural communities to tackle this issue with these community women.
Okay, so Ms. Alile, you know, what role do collaborations, partnerships play in accelerating impact in GBV matters? And I'd, you know, like us to focus a bit, just a little bit, on religious organizations. You know, what role can they play? Are they helping the situation? Are they worsening matters? You know, you can talk about other partnerships, but I would like you to also touch on that specifically.
I mean, for us, that's one of the most important things at play. I mean, it's one of the things that we, at the beginning of working with WRIF, were saying that who do we want to work with? And we called it the gatekeepers. And so that's what we call them. So we have, of course, the religious leaders, the traditional leaders, even law enforcement agencies. So it's really about awareness and making people understand what is necessary, what do you look out for, what do you see, what do you do better. And if you do find those situations, who do you come to, and getting all the information that is necessary. So we've done a lot of trainings for people, as you mentioned, in the religious sectors, law enforcement, and of course the traditional birth attendants as well, because those are the first people. So that's why we call them the gatekeepers, and that's why WARIF has done this work. Collaboration and partnership is key. I mean, there's no way we at ACT can do this on our own. There's no way WARIF can do it on their own. Even the government, we all have to come and join forces to do it. And also, because it helps us to also reduce the stigma of how people see it. We have to be able to have conversations about it, because it does happen. And we all know it. In our families, we're very quiet about it. We know it has happened to one auntie this, or one cousin this, or even a sister. But we're very quiet because we are afraid of the fear of the way people will look at that person. But you see, when you talk about it and you are very open about it, even in the churches or in the mosques, and people know that they can come up if something like this happens, that's where the collaboration comes in place, because we're giving them the right words. We're telling them how to say it. We're telling them when the person comes in, how do you manage that person and manage the families. And that's why we need all the collaborations, all the different stakeholders must come on the table. It's like a pot of jollof rice, as I always say when I come here. You can't do jollof and leave out tomatoes, you know. You just have to make sure that everyone is there. For the jollof rice to be sweet, for us to be able to achieve our goals, we want the whole sector to come, all the stakeholders to come into play and get involved in the gatekeepers, so that at least to a certain point, every community can have someone that they can go to because they trust that person and they know that the person has been trained and understand what to do next.
Yeah, very well said, very well said. Dr. Ibru, in terms of funding and support, how much support funding is actually available for gender-based violence advocacy organizations like
Not enough.
WARIF? Yeah.
Not nearly enough. I mean, when we're dealing with a scope, the magnitude is that high. We're dealing with a problem that's multi-layered, with so many intersections, with other challenges and issues. And you begin to just grapple with just the sheer numbers. And how do you then effectively impact with regards to appropriate essential services, justice, and all the other ancillary care that's necessary to reintegrate survivors into the environment. So it's a big challenge for us with regards to sourcing funds. And it's a continued hard cap-in-hand work that is part and parcel of making the impact as we would like to, especially in moving that needle, as I keep saying. I mean, I always say this, when we talk about this gender-based violence, we always have to go back to the very start of it and ask why. Yeah. And we have to remember that it comes simply from just that inequality that we see. And then we look at our country, Nigeria, I mean, we're 118 out of 134 on that equality index. And they say it's going to take us 130 years to reach gender parity. So even through that lens, it's, you know, the idea of trying to then identify, put change, and then be able to see the transformative difference in the lives of these women. I mean, I think it's doable, but it certainly can't be done, as Osayi likely said, without the collaboration and partnerships of grant-giving organizations like hers, as well as, you know, the governmental interventions and agencies that work alongside with us.
Well, just before I let you go, you know, I'm just wondering, are we really winning the war, you know, against gender-based violence in Nigeria, especially with the level of toxicity that exists on social media? Yeah. You know, there's this new thing now that, you know, women, they play victim, you know, the next available excuse is gender-based violence. Are we winning that war, very briefly?
Wow, I must say, not really. No, we're not. We're not. We have to, gosh, it's very overwhelming for us that are involved in this kind of work, because in a certain year you feel that you've done a lot, and then by the end of the year you look at the numbers and you see the sheer volume that's coming in and you realize that you haven't even touched anything. So we are not. And we just have to, we need to do things and do it better. And it's across board, even the families, the private sector, public sector, social sector, every one of us have to do it better. We are not winning the war. I was reading something today in social media, and how someone made a comment, and they came and pulled the comment down and said, oh, it's not a big deal. And he came back and put the comment up again. And this is just the things that we're talking about. I mean, when you feel to yourself that you can make those comments and get away with it, and abuse the inequality of how we see things and how we should just continue things. We just have to do things. We just have to make sure that we do things better. And that's why we need the government to get involved and put in some policies in place. And I know Lagos State has done a lot of work. We've seen, I mean, over the years that we've done this is one of the first times that we've seen so much has happened in terms of people being convicted for all the things they've done. So we just want things to go even further. But telling me that we've won the war, no, I can't. I just will say yes to that.
And I agree with you. I think it's really sad that the social media, impact is one that people rely on, because in truth, when you talk about a false rape claim, it's only 2 to 9% of the cases that are apparent.
Well, we appreciate all the work you do, and we hope it gets a little bit better in the years going forward. Osayi Alile, CEO of Aspire Coronation, and Dr. Kemi Dasilva-Ibru, the Executive Director of Women at Risk International Foundation. Thank you both for coming in.
Thank you again for having us.
Yes, thank you.